Hey guys, it's Jay here, and I'm so excited to be here in the financial district of Manhattan, and we are so blessed to have Thania Peck here with us. Thania is a fashion beauty industry content creator, the creative director of Catcher in the Style, an activist for sustainability, and an advocate for a climate-positive fashion and beauty industry. She started modeling before creating her lifestyle and fashion blog. Her blog not only emphasizes her love of fashion, but also her passion for philanthropy. Intending to spread love and positivity, Thania serves as an ambassador to 4 youth charities, is a mentor and a nonprofit volunteer. She's a UN partner and works closely with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Her work with major fashion and beauty brands as a strategic partner in sustainable practices has made her a dominant voice in the fashion and beauty industry movement of sustainability. This year, she's working on public policy with goals to create a circular fashion industry and greater transparency for consumers. Please welcome to the show, Thania Peck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about you, maybe where you grew up and how you got to where you are today?
All right, so originally I'm from South Africa, and I grew up in San Diego, just in the mountains, and surrounded by a lot of land, earth, and so I really appreciate just doing better, working with people in my industry to kind of just be more mindful of nature and the ramifications of our choices to people.
Thania and I first met at the UN Youth Climate Summit back in September, and it was amazing because we both had a passion for climate and sustainability. And can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into that side of things? I know you've been in fashion for a while now, and so what brought you awareness to sustainability and things like that?
So last year I was working with the UN a lot, just talking about sustainability in fashion and beauty industries. And I wasn't really posting it on my social media just because of fear of what brands would think about that, because my job, Jay, is like posting products. I'm a fashion blogger and beauty blogger. So I had to figure out a way to get this message across to the consumers, have them be more educated on some of the things that we learn at the UN and some of the different kind of like educational things that we have been privy to, translating that to a consumer. So it's more simple. And so basically end of last year, I decided that I was going to talk to my management and tell them that I was going to talk about more important topics that are passionate to me on social media. And so I just started doing it because I didn't know how that was going to be. I couldn't look up to somebody to see what they were doing.
Wow.
Because there was no, that person didn't exist. So I had to become that person. And I've been talking to my peers about just being mindful of their conversations they're having with consumers. And now I work with universities, now I'm working with all these people, foundations, you.
Yeah.
And, it's like, if you would have told me 6 months ago that we would be doing this and so much has gone on, I would have been like, what's that going to look like? But you just kind of have to do it, and then you figure it out later. So it's an exciting time, because next year there's going to be so many more things that we're going to get to. Right.
And this episode is focusing a little bit on SDG climate action, SDG 13, as well as SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. Yeah. And I know you've worked with a lot of companies, brands, and so can you talk to us a little bit about that and sort of how you've gone about, maybe working with people who probably don't have the same views as you, or maybe there are those companies and brands that exist that do. How's that been, those partnerships?
So the way that I have been working with brands is one of 2 ways. So when a brand is not a part of sustainability, the conversation, I meet with them and I'll talk to them kind of just like about why they're not, or what are they working on to get there, and the positive impacts towards a company that will happen if they are working towards sustainable development goals. Because when a company uses eco-friendly products, or they're utilizing different factors that are eco-friendly, they're their energy prices will drastically come down. So that's something that, less carbon emissions and everything like that. So I just talk to them about those type of things. And there's so many textile technologies, and for me that's exciting in fashion and beauty to see that kind of happen. And so I kind of tell them, like, yeah, if you want to be kind of on the forefront of some innovation, there's this and this happening, and if you do it, then you could be the first in your industry to kind of be a part of that. And that's kind of exciting for them too, because that's like a whole nother, marketing kind of play they can push. But then also there's a lot of people that are working on SDGs, and with the people that aren't working on it, as far as right now, they ask me, the major question is like, how do I start getting the company towards that way? And I'm always like, well, you got to start small. You got to start small at little steps, and then figure out, if that works, continue to do it, work on something else. Because to be a sustainable individual, you have to start small and work on little things in your everyday life in order to get to that mindset. Because trying to do everything right away, how can you grasp your mind on that? Just changing things right away, you wouldn't have any fundamental foundations of a good infrastructure.
So when I was back here in September, I got to go to a dinner with Nike, and my followers were a little hesitant about where I was going and why I would be with them, because I know you were there at the summit earlier, and a lot of the students had lashed out at some of the companies that were present. But when I was there, it was amazing to hear that the sustainability department at Nike was making strides, and they were trying to launch their Move to Zero campaign. And so you brought up a good point about companies starting small and working to grow their brands. So if there are other, and I think that that's amazing, like we need more Thanias in this world. And so if there are other influencers watching, what do you think is something healthy that they should be doing to be able to champion this as well?
So there are a lot of brands that are kind of moving their direction in that way, and for influencers to kind of be a part of that conversation. If you're not a part of the conversation, you're part of the problem. So if you're pushing products and not being mindful of where the product's coming from, who's making it, who's involved, what chemicals are going into that process, that is a part of the problem. And that goes for brands, that goes for influencers, individuals, everybody across the board. So to systematically change this ship into a positive direction, we always have to think about working together, right? So everybody counts, everybody matters, and your everyday decisions matter.
Switching things over now, I want to get to just talk to you a little bit about how you take care of yourself. You're doing this work, and I know being a blogger is probably you're always working. And so how does Thania find time for herself? What are some of your mechanisms that you can share with all the other young people watching?
I mean, this kind of movement has taken over my life, but it's so exciting. It's so fun to see the change happen. We were talking earlier about, we did a campaign with Senator Gineris, our New York State Senator, and prior to that, Senator Gineris had wrote a bill that was promoting automatic voting registration, and so it was sitting in Congress for the past 2 years. And a bunch of friends and I, we just started posting it on social media, and I work with Plus One Vote, which is voter advocacy and nonpartisan voter registration. So we just started posting it on social media, and the very next week that bill passed, which was huge for us. And so, I mean, in taking care of other people and making them a part of the conversation, I take care of myself because it gets me really excited. Like endorphins are releasing. I'm like, yes, automatic voter registration for everybody. Okay.
Wow.
So that would mean when you get your license, you are automatically registered to vote. So there wouldn't be this process that you need to kind of get to. But so things like that are really exciting for me. And I changed in my life. I don't buy meat. I don't. When I'm very mindful of my plastic intake in my everyday life and the products that I'm using, and using more clean products. If I work with a brand, I build a relationship with that brand and I ask them questions. I get to sit and ask brands questions just face to face, and that's really exciting for me too. So I don't really have a lot of time for my personal life, but I feel like that is become my personal life, is taking care and moving this ship in a positive direction. Because next year I'm going to go back to regularly scheduled programming of posting my beauty routine and my outfits, but it's all going to be sustainable.
Yes.
But we have to systematically change the kind of industry to get it that way. So
yeah, you brought up a really great point. You talked about how, in essence, how change really starts with you.
Yes.
And you talked about some of your own practices, and I feel like there are a lot of people watching today thinking, and my small change, it doesn't matter. And so what would you have to say to them who's probably watching at home? They probably don't have a platform, or they probably don't have anything that they can use to leverage huge amounts of change. What would you say to them?
I would say start educating yourself, start reading articles, start watching documentaries, find the facts, and then you can kind of put everything in perspective as to what your choices are. And once you know what's happening overseas and even in our own country, you'll actually hold yourself accountable for what's going on, because you cannot have a change happen if you're not going to be making positive choices.
Wow.
So everybody has to work together in it.
Yeah. Wow.
And plus, like, what we do is so much fun.
Yeah.
It's so new, and we're like figuring it out as we go. And so working with environmentalists, working with brands, working with schools. This is exciting because we don't know what it looks like, but it's definitely going in a positive direction.
Wow.
You know, I could just pitch ideas. I met with the dean of a school last week. We're going to Columbia next week, and we're just educating on like how social media can be used in a positive way. So it's an exciting time.
So I don't know about you, but I always seem to encounter this question a lot, and it's, what are some of the challenges you've overcome? And it's such an open-ended question. I can think of so many things that I've had to battle to get to where I am now. Tell us a little bit about some of those things for you. What were those like?
Well, some of the challenges that I have overcame in my own mind, even working with brands, is like I'll talk to them because I'm very steadfast on getting a circular supply chain going on for these brands, because it matters in third world countries, and even in LA, the sweatshops the conditions are really terrible. And so my thing is like, are you paying fair living wages? Some of them would be like, ooh, or some of them would be like 80% of our factories are fair living wages. But then they also raise the question, if we're paying fair living wages and somebody else isn't paying fair living wages, is it fair for us to be selling at this higher margin when somebody else is coming in there and are able to sell at a lower margin? What's really fair? And consumers don't understand that when you're paying a little more for something, that a brand is transparent as to why they're paying that. I think that consumers, the education on that is very key. And so for me, some of those challenges, because I'm like, why isn't it 100%? Why aren't you paying 100% of fair living wages? Everybody should, because that would make their lives in other countries better. That would make their lives in the factories in LA better. Just because somebody's a refugee doesn't mean you have to pay them pennies on the dollar. Just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a humanitarian issue there. So in me building partnerships with brands, I get to a point where I'm able to have that conversation with them, and I think that that's super key, because I feel comfortable talking to them about it. They're transparent with me on their processes and where they're at and where they're going, so we can just kind of be like mono.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, this is important to me. This is important for us to be mindful of the farmer and where our products are coming from, because right now farmers are even facing the most mental illness ever. And they're making our clothes, they're making our food because of these pesticides. It shouldn't be like that. You know what I mean? So there are other technologies like in textiles that are pretty amazing, like plant-based things. But then also what comes with that is some of these plant-based technologies, in the process, sometimes it's harmful for the person creating that because there's some toxins happening there. So we've got to we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And so every time I hear of something going on and there's something else that's going on that's negative, it kind of sets me back and I'm like, oh man, I felt like we're almost there. But then I think of the positive ramifications of just kind of like the movement that we're doing. We just have to keep on working harder, and we can't get down on these certain specific things happening. We just got to keep on pushing forward.
And so the UN is titling this their Decade of Action. We're only 10 years away from 2030, and so we want to know how you are going to use these next 10 years. What are some things you have in the works and some plans to make sure that our 2030 agenda is accomplished?
Well, my goals are big.
All right.
I am systematically working with brands to change their processes on what they're doing, from the farm to the factory to when it gets to consumers. I have a list of things that I go in and ask them when we can make a meeting. I met with H&M for 3 hours the other day, and just systematically asking them hey, what about this? What about this? I heard about this. What do you guys think about that? And so that's just like one of the brands I was talking to. But I'm meeting with tons of brands, and then working with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and I connect the brands that want to kind of move in that direction. I link them with them, and so they can get a circular model going into their infrastructure. And then I work with climate activists and different other foundations. We love ourselves some climate activists. Yeah. So I work with other foundations, and right now we're working with so many different people. There's another foundation called Art Loves Earth, which takes influencers to different climate-affected places. So they work with scientists, they work with indigenous people, and they're educating influencers that have a lot of followers on their platforms, and so that they can get mindful of that and educate their consumers that are following them and their followers on climate ramifications. So just working with everyone. So I would love to work with you guys.
Work with her, and I think you're setting the bar, for a lot of other influencers out there who have maybe probably used their brands probably for themselves, and but it can be more than that, And so you really inspire us, and I'm so happy we got to sit down.
I'm so happy that you guys came and visited me.
Yes, we are so happy to be here. And if people want to stay connected with you, if they want to follow the work you're doing, or maybe contact you if they want to partner, where can they find you?
At Catcher in the Style.
All right.
Catcher in the Rye, but Catcher in the Style.